Tonight on Intimate Portrait.
I was called plain and unattractive and untalented.
She began her extraordinary life in the shadows. Daughter of a legend.
Cut.
Girlfriend of a superstar.
I fell in love with him from the moment he opened the door.
But with single-minded determination, she stepped into her own spotlight with the grace and style that can only define Anjelica Huston.
She always had that class thing going for her.
No one had any idea how far she could go because she could go anywhere.
Always a survivor, Anjelica talks openly for the first time about coping with the end of her woman who has found her way.
Life's been good to me.
Anjelica Huston, out of the shadows and into the light. I'm Lauren Bacall with an Intimate Portrait, next. Anjelica Huston was born in 1951, a true Hollywood blue blood. Her legendary father, John Huston, was the director of such classics as The Maltese Falcon and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. At the time of Anjelica's birth, he was in the Belgian Congo making The African Queen. I was on the set visiting my husband, Humphrey Bogart, when Anjelica's father got the telegram.
He put it in his pocket, and finally Lauren Bacall said, "For God's sakes, John, tell us what it says," because I was imminent, and he said it's Anjelica with a J.
Anjelica's mother, Enrica Soma, was a dancer with the New York City Ballet and graced the cover of Life magazine at 17. Her beauty caught the attention of producer David Selznick, who offered Ricky a contract at a Hollywood studio. But before her movie career could begin, the 20-year-old gave it up to become John Huston's fourth wife and a mother. When she was 2, Anjelica entered the magical land of leprechauns, fairies, and Blarney. Disillusioned with living in Hollywood, her father moved the family to Ireland, where he could play country squire on a 110-acre estate known as St. Clarence.
He liked wild places, faraway places. He liked adventure. He didn't like to live safe. He didn't like a middle class or a bungalow existence. My father was always either in shacks or in palaces. I could never imagine him in the middle road.
At St. Clarence, Anjelica and her older brother Tony were isolated from the real world. She had few friends, but a lively imagination, and already had a penchant for acting. Anjelica loved playing dress-up, and her favorite game, wedding.
Veils to me symbolized romance, beauty, mystery. I liked anything in a veil. I remember saying to my father when I was about 6 that I wanted to be a nun. And he said, "That's great, honey. When are you going to start?"
At the center of Anjelica's universe was her mother, and Anjelica idolized her.
She liked to have fun. She was more like a girlfriend to me, really, than parental figure. She would take us out of school to go to a great exhibition at a gallery. It was always very exciting to be around my mother. She always had plans.
Anjelica's father was often away filming. The rare times he was home, the estate came to life with both friends and treasures he collected from exotic locations.
He was extravagant. He came back from the Barbarian and the Geisha with kimonos for all of us, and we all wore kimonos for the rest of that summer.
But as carefree and bright as things appeared on the surface, When she got older, Anjelica realized her parents' relationship had a dark side. They lived in separate dwellings on the estate. Her father occupied the large main house, and back in the woods, her mother stayed in a smaller place with the children.
Although these houses were separated by some 200 or 300 yards, there was more to that division, I think, than meets the eye.
John Huston was known for his roving eye and less than discreet affairs, and Anjelica was often introduced to other women he brought to the estate. At the age of 12, she discovered her father had a 2-year-old son with one of those women.
And he sat us down and said, "I have wonderful news. You have a little brother," which was somewhat shocking at the time.
Anjelica's half-brother Danny eventually became the little boy she protected, and Danny held his big sister in awe.
I remember this sort of rather Irish, possibly savage, dark-haired beauty against this green Irish landscape.
Riding with her father on their Irish estate, Anjelica grew to love adventure and wide-open spaces. Easily.
I think it was very important to her to have Dad's approval because, in a sense, not only was he a father to us, but also almost a god.
John Huston could be critical, demanding, and even cruel, but he taught Anjelica the tough lessons of survival that would last her whole life.
You just kind of had to prove yourself to my father, and he liked courage. If you fell off the horse, you got back up, and that could go on for, days. And as often as you'd fall off, as often as you would have to get back up.
Anjelica's ability to rise after a blow was truly tested when her parents decided to separate. Ricky moved to London, and Anjelica was uprooted from the Irish countryside she loved to start a whole new life in the city.
I hated the first years in London with a passion. I hated the concrete. I hated the weather. It was a really unhappy experience, and I cried every day. It was like a world falling apart. My parents never really discussed their separation with us, and I guess it's still my policy that if you don't ask questions, you won't get lies, or worse, the truth.
But Anjelica was a survivor. She adapted to her new life and transformed herself from young Irish lass to a rebellious teen of the 60s.
I wore a lot of pancake makeup and yes, fishnet stockings, a lot of black lines around my eyes. My father was horrified. I got into trouble with him when I went home to Ireland on holidays.
I remember when my sister was looking perfectly okay and absolutely lovely and innocent, and Dad would give her one of those looks where maybe she was being a little bit too expressive in her attire.
Measuring up to her father was not the only challenge. Anjelica was not motivated in school, and it was a disinterest in the classroom that led to her stardom.
Very early on, I decided I wanted to be an actress. It was probably the realization that I'd probably never be all that much good at anything else, because I was not scholastically inclined.
At 16, Anjelica was just a breath away from embracing every actor's fantasy. World-renowned director Franco Zeffirelli approached her about starring in Romeo and Juliet. The part that would make Olivia Hussey an overnight sensation might have been hers.
My father, however, had decided at that point that he was going to give me my start. He wrote a letter to Zeffirelli to say that he no longer wanted me to be considered for that part, that I was going to make a movie with him.
Anjelica's launching was the complicated medieval love story, A Walk with Love and Death.
Heron, I love you, and I want to be with you all my life.
The teenager struggled under the critical eye of the man who was both father and director.
Cut. Cut! No, dear. You forgot entirely.
The hands didn't do anything that they were supposed to.
They would.
It's got to be absolutely exact.
I was miserable. I didn't want to make the movie. I didn't want to participate in any of it. But it went ahead.
Should we go through this again?
I think she was very alone in that experience, and kept it all very much to herself. But it was evident that it was hard.
My father and I fought all the time. I didn't like my lines. I think I was monstrous to work with. And of course, we were having problems at the time because he didn't particularly like my look or my attitude. And I, of course, didn't like to have my look or my attitude criticized, so we were somewhat at odds.
Anjelica's first starring role had been a painful learning experience, but nothing compared to the suffering that was to come. Just before the film was released, Anjelica's beloved mother, who was her biggest supporter and best friend, was killed in a car accident. Ricky was 39, Anjelica just 17.
It's the most devastating thing that ever happened to me. It's not like you can ever really cope with that stuff. You have no choice but to go on living, but it doesn't mean that you're handling it. There's just no way to deal with it other than to survive it.
In the midst of trying to cope with the loss of her mother, the reviews on Anjelica's performance in A Walk with Love and Death came pouring in on top of her. The critics were merciless.
I was called plain and unattractive and untalented. And although somewhere in your heart of hearts you might not believe that, it's still pretty tough when you're faced with it in print.
Will you welcome, please, Anjelica Huston and Asaf Diane.
Stung by the critics and still hurting from the death of her mother, Anjelica somehow pulled herself together to face the public and promote the film on the popular talk show David Frost. In front of a television audience of millions, she apologized to her father.
I don't really think I've done him justice in the film, and that I'm very sorry about it. I decided that I couldn't blame anyone, you know. I mean, my personal view of myself in the film it's just no good, you know.
But Anjelica, the survivor, would not count herself out completely.
So potentially, I'm a very good actress. I don't think the film shows it. I don't think I show it in the film. But that's what I want to do. I want to knock people out this time.
Anjelica Huston would not star in another movie for more than a decade. But the next time would be different. Devastated by the loss of her mother, universally panned by the critics, and just 18 years old, Anjelica Huston's world seemed to be crashing down around her. But the teenager got back up and set about trying to make her way, this time without her father.
After I finished A Walk with Love and Death, my objective was to get as far away from him as possible and to lead my own life, to do what I wanted to do, to be self-sufficient.
Looking for independence and a new adventure, Anjelica left London and moved to New York City. There she met renowned fashion photographer Richard Avedon, who was a dear friend of her mother's. Avedon liked the teenager's exotic, leggy look and photographed her for Vogue magazine. The pictures caused a sensation, giving birth to a whole new career in front of the lens.
I always liked working in front of camera. I liked the fantasy part of it. I think it was a throwback to the days of dressing up and veils. I liked putting a picture together.
Anjelica's theatrical look made her a favorite of the top fashion photographers.
Having such style, all her poses, all her positions, her manner was one that you would want to capture on film.
Anjelica's new career led to her first big romance when the teenage model fell in love with Bob Richardson, a fashion photographer in his 40s.
Bob was, to a large extent, my teacher, and he showed me many things. I learned a lot from him.
But Anjelica's 4-year relationship with the much older Richardson ended after she took him to Mexico to meet her father, who did not approve.
My father had open contempt for Bob, and Bob I don't think was all that crazy about my dad either. So when we were returning from that trip, Bob and I were due to change planes in Los Angeles and go back to New York, and I said goodbye to him at the airport and never saw him again.
Anjelica decided to stay in Los Angeles, thus beginning a whole new life amidst the glitter and glamour of Hollywood. Hoping to meet new people, the 22-year-old went to a party that would alter her existence for the next 17 years. It was Jack Nicholson's 36th birthday.
I wasn't particularly excited about going to this party until the door opened and there was Jack, and with that smile, and that was it. I fell in love with him from the moment he opened the door.
Theirs was a whirlwind Hollywood love story. Anjelica moved in almost immediately.
I think he sort of had no choice. I was instantly smitten, and I don't think he could do anything to defend himself.
Anjelica was more than happy to build her life around Jack and put her own career ambitions on hold.
There were about 3 or 4 years where I was really rather content not to do much with myself. Those years were a lot about Jack. He had a big life already. He was very much in demand. He was at the top of his form. So I was very happy for a while to just be around Jack. And also I just didn't feel like doing anything for a while. I was in love and I was lazy.
And for the first time, Anjelica had the approval of her father.
My father and Jack were almost like father and son, I should say. Jack didn't have a father, and my father had enough love to go around for several sons.
Jack and Anjelica defined the 70s motto of big parties and free love. Like her parents before her, she found herself in a relationship that was never defined as completely committed.
There were times that I did want to marry him, and times when he wanted to marry me, but we never seemed to want to marry each other at exactly the same time. I can't really give you the reasons for that, other than fear of commitment, probably on both of our parts. I think if you feel those things, it's for a reason. So I guess that's why it didn't happen.
Still, close friends thought they were perfectly suited and would go on forever.
Well, you know, it's like in Annie Hall. Paul Simon says, you know, do you want to come over later? We're going to meet Jack and Anjelica. And it used to be one word, you know, which was great in the sense that they were in love, but also, you know, that wasn't all there was.
There was much more. After years of complacency, Anjelica's desire to have a film career was slowly coming back. But in Jack's shadow, no one seemed to notice.
Well, I didn't see that she was approaching a career. I remember her saying that she decided she wanted to act and no one would take her seriously. And so I was doing Laverne and Shirley. I said, well, hey, no one takes us seriously. Why don't you come on down? And so I said, we'll give you something. The first part she played was she was a model on a runway with the Eiffel Tower on her head. I mean, it was her big break, I feel.
Anjelica continued to test the waters with bit parts on television. She then inched back into movies with the small role of the lion tamer in Jack Nicholson's film The Postman Always Rings Twice. But like so many others, Jack did not take her career seriously.
And Jack was at a point of, major success in his life, and had been there for a long time, and to have to hear someone talk about, well, I was up for this part, I didn't get this part.
Had to explode. He was having a baby with 26-year-old Rebecca Broussard.
I was very devastated by our having to separate, but there was no choice. There was no way that I could go on being with Jack, who was fathering a child by another woman. I'm not that kind of woman. It's thoughtlessness or carelessness, ultimately, that's terribly hard to forgive. And I felt as though my time and my love and my dedication in some way had been macheted. and that's hard to take because, it sort of makes you feel worthless for a time. You reevaluate your whole life, you examine your existence, you haul yourself over the coals, you wonder what you did wrong, you wonder what you might have done right, and you try to behave as decently as possible under the circumstances.
The press was relentless, and through it all, Anjelica kept the poise and class that have become her hallmark.
Ultimately, maintaining your dignity in the light of public humiliation, if you will, is about as good as you can do. Particularly when you're not really responsible for the humiliation. It never feels good to have been left, and to have been left for a younger woman, all of this stuff. It comes with a lot of baggage, and as best I could, I tried to expedite my own recovery. And yes, I had some very, very hard times, some dark nights of the soul.
You look wonderful.
Wonderful, I think, would be pushing it.
5 years later, to the surprise of many, Anjelica agreed to co-star opposite her ex in The Crossing Guard.
So, how's business?
They played a divorced couple dealing with the death of their daughter. For Anjelica, it was a chance to put her talents to use and their relationship fully to rest.
I've been so angry at you for so damn long. Too angry to see you or hear you or care about you. It wasn't necessarily about forgiveness for me. It was about, can I do this? Can I portray this person? Do I know about loss? Those were my main reasons for doing that. And also, maybe in a way to bless it and let it go. I haven't seen him in quite some time. I think it's sort of another life to me. Now I can look back on it, whereas once I felt like it was all around me and in my eyes and ears and down my throat. I don't feel that way anymore. I can I can be objective. I can hear things said about him and not feel personally involved. I can look at pictures of him with his children and not feel a dagger in my heart, or, you know, the ugly feeling of betrayal, and I don't want to. I really don't. I don't want to feel those feelings, and I've worked hard not to feel them anymore. And life's been good to me.
Having finally said goodbye to Jack Nicholson, Anjelica was able to fully open her heart to a new man. His name is Robert Graham, and her relationship with this world-renowned sculptor would help Anjelica begin a new chapter in love and work. After years of struggle, Anjelica Huston has not only achieved Hollywood stardom, she has finally found a true sense of balance in her personal life with critically acclaimed artist Robert Graham.
He's funny, he makes me laugh, he's protective. It's not like relationships I used to have that were always up and down. It's much steadier and much simpler somehow.
Firmly established in his own right, Robert is the sculptor responsible for the Olympic Gateway in Los Angeles. His critically acclaimed and controversial work can be seen in cities and museums around the globe. And he credits the ease of their relationship to having like-minded souls.
It helps very much that we're both artists. She has an artist's sensibility and conscience, and I think that's what gives her that particular magic, that she can portray these characters in such a true way.
He's very supportive of me, very supportive of my work, which is a new phenomenon in my life.
With newfound support and happiness, Anjelica has been drawn to lighter roles. The Addams Family movies not only allowed her to laugh, she was able to play her favorite game from childhood.
Play Morticia in the mirror, you know. Morticia was almost like as good as a bride. The black hair was a veil.
And after playing with veils dozens of times as a child, in 1992, at the age of 41, Anjelica finally became a bride. I looked on with close friends and family as Anjelica said, "I do, for real."
I didn't wear a veil, but I wore a white hat. I thought it might be a bit late for a veil. And then I danced all night. Perfect.
She was a dame on her wedding day and a girl on her wedding day because, you know, she has such stature and everything, but she's also such a girl.
If there was anything that I would envy in her life, it would be that relationship. It's absolutely magical.
While Anjelica once wanted children, she is now more than content to spend time with her husband and her niece and nephews.
I've tried to have children on several occasions. It's you know, and it's involved for me operations and I guess if I were more passionate about it, I'd adopt. I don't feel as though my life isn't complete if I don't have children.
Anjelica's life continues to be filled with possibilities and challenges. Embracing her father's legacy, she recently went behind the camera as a director.
And action.
She tackled the controversial television. The directorial debut, Anjelica earned one of the highest awards in television, an Emmy nomination.
Directing the movie was greatly influenced by being at her father's side for so long, and you know, even when she wasn't paying attention, she must have been getting all this by osmosis.
Even though Anjelica is still in her 40s, she has the grace, wisdom, and depth that can only come from living and experiencing many extraordinary lives. I can honestly say that her father, as demanding as he was, would be proud. But more importantly, Anjelica Huston, who worked so hard as a child for acceptance, has made herself happy.
I think it's a really good time in my life. I'm not as prone to beating myself up. I'm glad to be out of that syndrome. I'm glad not to have to work so hard for my own approval, let alone everyone else's.